Hey everyone, thanks for watching the Commander's Brew right here on YouTube. If you like these deck techs, you know what to do. Go down, hit subscribe, and also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/commandersbrew. You can help make the show directly, contribute to the decks that we talk about on our show with your own suggestions by getting in on our Discord as a patron. There's also other perks. Go check it out, patreon.com/commandersbrew. But, you know, let's start talking about this week's big deck. We are, lately we've been brewing a lot with the current cards. We've been brewing with the C19 product. We were brewing with, M20 commanders. There's been so many great commanders that have come out in recent sets. We just did a big set review for Throne of Eldraine. I want to take a step back. I want to take a little quick step back from all the current exciting stuff that is happening, and we've got some great commanders, coming out of the Brawl precons and coming out of Throne of Eldraine and so on. But let's just take a breather here and let's look back at an old classic. You know what? Let's just really calm it down. Let's really settle down. Let's go to a classic monocolored deck. What about that? This is going to be my first ever on the show. No, maybe.
What?
First
is
ever
that
mono
even
blue.
Possible? Oh, mono blue. Okay.
No, I've done monocolored decks before.
Yeah,
but
Darian.
I think this is my first mono blue deck. Anyways,
okay.
And I'm excited. This is one that I saw. Like, this is the thing that I think most Commander players think of when they first get into playing, is that we see the card Clone, and we go, that card's awesome.
Yes.
Like, what a fun card. My
Yes.
creature is your creature, right? You have a great creature. Well, now I have one. It's only 4 mana. It's really cool. And we've seen lots and lots of different iterations of that card since then, and a lot of similar cards. So it's like it's an obvious theme that sticks out to us as players, and I think it's a great. This deck is great for a lot of great reasons. So I wanted to do a mono blue clones, copies, and borrow deck. So,
okay.
So since playing Commander, I've noticed that these types of decks are super fun and very 75%, right? Because they're only as good as the table is good, which is great. But one thing about them always stood out to me, and that's the stealing aspect of them, taking your stuff, right? The mind controls, the control magics, People don't like that. People hate that. If I use an enchantment to steal your stuff, they get mad, and they come for you, right? They come for you. So I wanted to mitigate that. I wanted to actually eliminate that from the deck, because one of the great things is that if you're cloning, people are kind of like happy to see that you have, oh, you clone my guy. It's like, okay, well, unless it's going to kill them. I've even had moments where I'm just like, yeah, you picked my thing. My thing is the best. Like, there's my boy. He's doing good over there.
Yeah.
So
MVP of the table.
Exactly. So that's the idea. We wanted to clone, copy, and borrow. And we'll talk about what borrowing exactly means. So with this idea, I went to our Discord server and I asked some of our friends, you guys have seen lots of decks like this. It's a pretty classic type of deck, but what are some things that are not as classic? What's some ideas for commanders and so on? And a really great idea was brought up to use Thada Adel, Acquisitor. 1 blue, the 2/2 legendary Merfolk Rogue. Sorry, I'm switching the view there. With Island Walk, and whenever Thada deals combat damage to a player, search that player's library for an artifact card and exile it. Then that player shuffles his or her library until end of turn. You may cast that card. You might be thinking, Andy, I thought you said you weren't going to steal anything from people, right? And here's the thing: it's not stealing. You don't even have it yet, right? So, what's better than stealing, but kind of the same? Borrowing. You'll get it back at the end of the game. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But specifically, what I thought with that Adele and why it still kind of fits is that I'm not you didn't invest mana into this thing, and now I'm taking it from you, right? I'm taking it from your library, yes, but you might never even draw that card. So it's a little bit. I think that people are going to hate it less, especially if you've ever played against a Thada Adel deck, if you've ever played with one, that Thada is just great at getting mana rocks for her mono blue, and mana rocks in mono blue are just going to help. It's just a little bit of ramp. She's kind of just like a very good repeatable ramp card.
Yeah.
So that's the aim. Aim at someone, hit them with the Island Walk, grab their soul ring, play it, bam, you're laughing, right? grab another mana rock and don't draw too much attention to yourself, because if she hits for one or two things, you're pretty pleased.
Yeah.
And that's all she kind of needs to do. Now there's some other synergy in this deck surrounding her, but that's going to be encompassed in the neat moves.
Working on a
Neat.
All right, so before we get into cloning, copying, borrowing, we got to get Thada Adele to let us ramp a little bit, and we got to get her in with that island walk. So, Sean, why don't you talk about these first two cards that are going to help us do that?
Ooh, gotta have islands to island walk. So how about Quicksilver Fountain? It's a 3-mana artifact. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a flood counter on target non-island land he or she controls. That land is an island as long as it has a flood counter on it. And at the end of turn, if all lands in play are islands, remove all flood counters from them. This came up in an early episode of Battle of the Brews. Alistair's Sea Monster Tribal deck was playing it. And you all got islands. And it starts eating up your non-islands. So if you have a few non-basics, and that's it. They're islands now. They're basic islands. If you have a couple of mountains, maybe those mountains start becoming islands. The only way to get around it is by stop playing lands so that all the flood counters get removed, because everything's an island. But you can't stop playing lands. You got to keep playing into it. And the flood counters don't go away.
No, yeah.
If Quicksilver Fountain goes away, now I forget. Now I don't think they're islands anymore, because Quicksilver Fountain isn't saying that about flood counters.
No, they are, because we've looked this up so many times because we do play against this card a lot. But the flood counters are what make them islands. That's the official ruling on that. So if you can destroy Quicksilver Fountain, but if any of your lands still have the counters on them, they are islands.
Because of the phrase, as long as it has a flood counter on it.
Yeah, I believe
right?
so.
If it said all...
It's an island as long as there's a flood counter on it, yeah.
If it said something like all lands with flood counters are islands, and then when this goes away, that effect would end. But it doesn't say that.
Exactly.
And the other simple, smaller way is Spreading Seas. 1 and a white, one a blue, enchant land. Spreading Seas enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted land is an island. So if there is a non-blue player out there, you can force them to have an island, and you get your card back.
Yeah, and so these are just some... I even kind of thought about not including Quicksilver Fountain, because I think it draws a bit of hate. Mostly just artifact hate, which is actually kind of okay. Because once you get one player with a flood counter, or once you've just cast Spreading Seas on one thing, that's kind of all you need. You don't need much else, as long as because one player is just going to naturally have islands at least. And then if you're adding one of these to someone else, or in the rare occasion where no one's playing islands, you're going to need these cards. But you don't need to include a ton of them. And Spreading Season is another one that does basically the same thing, where they draw you cards, so they cantrip. So they're not really eating up too much space in your deck and things like that. So it's nice to be able to get that ramp, and then start cloning and copying. Those are specifically some cards that work well with that Adele. But let's start talking about clones. The original clone just comes in and becomes something, doesn't target. It just becomes something that's on the battlefield, a creature. We've since seen a lot of upgrades on this ability, and here's 3 great ones. First is Stunt Double. 3 and a blue, Flash, and you can have Stunt Double enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So this is the clone with Flash. Simple, straight up, same exact cost, 3 and a blue, except we can do this at instant speed. That's great. Next is Gigantoplasm. 3 and a blue, same thing, except you may have Gigantoplasm enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature, except it gains X. This creature has base power and toughness XX. So at any time after you've cast this, you can change its power toughness to be XX. Great for those creatures that are specifically have small power toughness for a reason, like double strikers and things like that. But Gigantoplasm really is helpful there. And then finally, we have Vizier of Many Faces, 2 blue. Same thing. It's a clone, except that if it has Embalm for 3 blue, meaning that when it's in the graveyard, you can pay 3 blue and cast it and you get a token copy. If it was embalmed, the token has no mana cost, it's white, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. So you get to clone something else, but it's a white zombie.
Double clone. Yeah, these are all strictly better than clone.
I mean, Vizier, you could argue isn't because it's too blue, but
Okay.
but yes,
Sure.
it essentially is though, right? You get 2 uses out of this, which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I love it. We got a copy package as well. Looking at you, Twin Cast, blue
So
for an instant.
it's not just copying creatures. We're
copying
copying
spells.
we copy
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
here.
Yeah, nothing is safe. Blue, Twin Cast, copy target instant or sorcery. You may choose new targets. This is great. I will remind you that this is all these cards also function as a counter spell, because you can copy the counter spell and then target it with it, and then that's a good way to get around that.
Yeah.
We're also talking about Fairy Artisans, 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Fairy Artificer with flying. And whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, we get a token copy of it that's an artifact. And it has a clause that if a new one shows up, all the other ones get exiled. So they don't get die triggers, they just disappear. But they would have leave the battlefield triggers if that's relevant.
Yeah.
But it's a way that, like, your opponents really have to play around this to be like, well, I can cast this, but I can't give you this creature straight out, so I'll have to have another creature to cast after it. So you'll get the ETB effect, but at least you'll move forward from it. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, Commander decks have a lot of ETB abilities. Fairy Artisans scoops them up.
Mm-hmm.
And of Mirror Mate. This is one of the most exciting new cards from the Throne of Eldraine set. It's 1 blue for an enchantment. You can have it enter as any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Copy enchantment doesn't happen too often. We said this in our set review because, like, they haven't given us this ability in a long time. So welcome back, Mirror Maid.
Yeah, Mirror Maid is a very exciting card because of that. Those cards are, not cheap and probably getting more and more expensive because they're not. I feel like also just not going to print copy enchantment again just because of the name copy enchantment. Like it's the least inventive name in all of Magic.
Yeah.
Copy artifact. Copy enchantment. It's just like you could have thought of something better than that. But Mirror Maid is both of those cards essentially, right? So yeah, we're copying artifacts, enchantments. We're copying spells on the stack. We're copying your creatures. We're trying to copy as much as we can here and make it work for us. We also want to borrow some things. So we want to get into that library and we want to grab a couple things for ourselves. So Acquire is a really cool card, 3 blue for a sorcery that says search target opponent's library for an artifact card. Put that card into play under your control. Then that player shuffles their library. Grab a mana rock if you really are struggling for mana, perhaps. Although at 5 mana, you're probably just going to go grab some cool artifact that they have, right? Think of something that's going to work with your synergies of what's going on. The great thing about these cards is like, oh, I'm going to acquire some artifact in their deck, like that's synergistic with their commander. Like that doesn't make any sense. That sucks. But you're playing their deck. Like
right.
You're probably going to have a couple of their creatures cloned, which are going to work well with their artifacts.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. It's really fun. Knowledge exploitation is one that works really well, specifically with Thought Adele, actually, because it's 5 blue, so 7 for a tribal sorcery rogue. You want those extra creature or extra card types in your graveyard or something, because it also has a prowl cost. So I'll read what it does first. So search target opponent's library for an instant or sorcery card. You may play that card without paying its mana cost. Then that player shuffles his or her library. Hello, expropriate. Hello, other big spells. 7 mana is a lot, but what it means is prowl means that you can play this for its prowl cost, again, which is 3 and a blue, if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a rogue. And it just so happens that Thad Adele certainly is a rogue.
She's a rogue.
Yeah, so she's a rogue. So if you can get in with that for some island walk damage, and then you can cast your knowledge exploitation for only 4, the same cost as a clone, I will say. And you can get some pretty massive spells with this. Or again, just you want a little bit of ramp, want a little bit of card draw, there's generally an instant or sorcery that can do that for you.
Yep.
And finally, probably the least good of these cards, but I like it. I can't help it.
And it has good in the name.
Yeah, stolen goods. 3 and a blue. It should be borrowed goods for this deck. But anyways, it's 3 and a blue for a sorcery that says target opponent exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a non-land card. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So you're going to want to target the big creature deck, the big stompy Naya deck, or you're going to want to target someone dealing with some like big card draw, stuff like that. Don't like. I would hesitate to target a real heavy control deck unless you're looking for like a board wipe or something, because you don't want to hit a counter spell.
No.
That's kind of it. Like any other non-land card, you're pretty happy with outside of a counter spell. So
Yeah.
so Stolen Goods is the variance of this deck is also one of the fun things about it. So I like Stolen Goods, even though it may not be the most efficient or most effective card.
I'd love to twin cast it.
Oh yeah, right. Definitely. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like I really did want to focus on copying like your opponent's stuff, because there's lots of stuff that lets us copy our own things.
Right.
I shied away from it for the most part. There's a couple little ones that might do it, but I generally shied away from it, and we want to be doing stuff from our opponent's libraries
Yeah.
and battlefields.
And there's also just because like you gotta have the cards to do the things, right? Like people need to be casting things for you to copy. So we're running one of a favorite on the show, Kumena's Awakening, 2 blue for an enchantment with Ascend, and commander decks very easily have 10 or more permanents in the game. So we'll have the City's Blessings, but at the beginning of my upkeep, each player draws a card. Unless I have the City's Blessing, then only I draw a card. So I'm happy to drop this early in this deck to give my opponents more stuff to play, because I want to copy and steal those things. And then once I get City's Blessing, only I benefit from it. And of course, we're running the OG Howling Mine, 2 generic for an artifact. At the beginning of each player's draw step, if Howling Mine is untapped, that player draws an additional card. This card is so old, it was made when tapping artifacts and made them not work anymore.
Yeah, weird, right?
Yeah.
Shout outs to Commander Cookout podcast. I think Brando specifically for the idea that because he reached out on Twitter when I asked about this deck, saying that like putting it with a lot of what's it called? What do you call when everyone does it?
Symmetrical draw effects.
Symmetrical draw effects is actually really good for this deck, because not only does it draw you into your stuff, it draws your opponents into stuff, which is the stuff you want to play, like Sean was just saying. So shout outs to those guys. They built a whole deck specifically with that in mind, whereas I've kind of just included a little bit of it because I think it's nice, effective, and obviously I didn't want to just build their deck for our show. But I love Kumena's Awakening because, like you said, drop it early, get everyone drawing, and then eventually it's just going to be you drawing, which is what you want.
Man, this seems fun, Andy. Like this deck would be so different at any table you sit down with. The only deck I wouldn't want to face with this is another clone deck, because then we both just be waiting for each other to do things.
Yeah, you're also not stoked about playing like, I don't know, against like Mizzix or something, or like. But this the beauty of Commander is like very rarely are you going to sit down at a 4-player game and have 3 spell decks versus your clone deck,
Yeah.
And if you know that that's happening, just be like, oh, I'm going to play a different deck,
Yeah.
So that is the beauty of it, and I can't wait to put this together and play it, because I do think it's going to be a different game every time you play.
Yeah.
And I love that with Commander. I love it. That's my favorite thing. So I'm very excited to do it. So yeah, shout outs to CCO and you can listen to their, I think it's episode 6. It's a very early one for them, where they did Kami of the Crescent Moon is their episode. And it's a really good one, and a lot of cool. It's fun listening to them talk about cards from back then. It's fun listening to old Commander podcast episodes just because of this in general, but on CCO specifically, they talk about Cyclonic Rift. And I think and they're like, oh, I gotta get some Cyclonic Rifts. They're like $5 or $6. So like, maybe I should pick them up. It's like, I hope you guys got them. I hope you guys picked them up.
Yeah.
But as far as surprises and discoveries go, I gotta give a shout out to our Discord, again, who helped out a lot with this. Specifically, Mondo, JP, and Joseph. You guys helped out a ton with this deck. Mondo, from a recent episode of Battle of the Brews, has a mono blue deck, and he contributed in a big way, giving us some like off the beaten path mono blue ramp. So I'll read the first 2 here. Okay, I messed with. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this first one is Mitotic Manipulation. Okay, 1 blue for a sorcery that says, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards onto the battlefield if it has the same name as a permanent. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this card is obviously not great in Commander, but it is permanent. So if you just use this on an island, this is a rampant growth sort of. You only look at the top 7, but you're very likely to hit an island in this deck.
Yeah.
To just put an island onto play.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's pretty good. Mono blue has this weird source of pseudo ramp type of thing that, like, once in a blue moon might miss, but generally speaking, I think you're going to be able to hit an island off of this.
Well, and there's the real possibility, like if an opponent has a Sol Ring out, you don't have to choose what you're looking for until you look at your top 7. So
That's
if
true.
your opponent has a Sol Ring and you happen to see your Sol Ring, there you go. It's in play now.
Yeah, because it is just a permanent that exists anywhere on the battlefield. It's fine, right? Even if someone hits a rogue, like if your Rogue's Passage gets up and someone already has one out, you can grab that.
Sure.
But definitely nice to have. And then I found one that was sort of similar. It's one more mana, so it's a little bit clunkier, but it's called Mimeofracture. And what Mimeofracture does is it's 3 and a blue, and it has Replicate, which is like, you're probably not going to replicate the spell, but the effect is choose target permanent and opponent controls, search that player's library for a card with the same name, and put it onto play under your control. Then that player shuffles their library. So it's very on theme with the deck. You're borrowing an island, or you know, so you have to pick something that has the same name as something in their deck. So if you pick island, they will have another island in their deck most likely. And then you can just grab that. So it's like 4 mana rampant growth. Sort of, but you have to put it into play tapped, so you know it's.
I also don't think it's the worst if you have to grab a forest, because like it's still more mana. Like I'll take it.
True, exactly. You don't need an island for it to work. Obviously, an island's better, but yes. But this strictly will only get basic lands because it doesn't need to be the same name, and obviously this is Commander, and those are the only cards that double up the name. But kind of interesting, kind of in the same vein as Mitotic Manipulation. And here's Sean, read this one. This is another Mondo suggestion here.
Okay, this is Savor the Moment. 1 blue for a sorcery. Take an extra turn after this one. Skip the untap step of that turn. Whoa.
Right. So what Mondo explained to me was that, take an extra turn, but you skip the untap step. But he says what this reads for a mono blue deck that wants to ramp is draw a card, play an extra land this turn. So it's kind of like exploration, but for blue.
Yeah.
Like you take an extra turn is just drawing that card, and then if you had 2 lands in your hand to begin with, you just get to ramp it up and play one out. So a little different than the Mitotic Manipulation and Mimeofracture effect, where it just grabs the land and puts it on the battlefield. But if you do have that land in your hand, Explore is a totally reasonable card, especially like Explore is borderline playable in green decks. But in a blue deck that doesn't ramp very well, I would say it's probably pretty good to play it.
Neat.
Yeah, cool. So it
Truly
cycles
a neat move.
and lets you play a land.
Okay.
So thanks, Mondo, for those. Thanks, JP, Mondo, Joseph. You guys gave us some great suggestions, and I think they really helped the deck out a lot. But
yeah, we're trying to put more like deck ideas in our Discord, and we'd love to hear from you. If you're in our Discord, please get in on those conversations. They're very exciting. Sometimes decks take wild turns between the idea and the recording. And we want to give you credit for those ideas, so please get on in there. And if you want to get on there, join our Patreon.
I almost made this like a Dimir deck or a Izzet deck But these mono blue suggestions kept coming and they were so strong and so cool. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick to blue on this one. But it looks like it's time for the budget report.
Okay. I heard that. This is coming in at $124.72.
Yes.
A little bit pricey. Monocolored decks, sometimes when you're doing like super cool cards that like have unique effects, that's going to happen. What are the 3 most expensive cards in the deck?
Right. So yeah, $124. We can get that down. And I wanted to, again, I like to leave the kind of really effective, expensive cards in the deck almost just to highlight what cards you don't actually need.
Okay.
If that makes sense, right?
Sure. It's kind of
the
old like
price under $100 very simply by cutting these 3 cards. And you can see that like there's a lot of clone and copy effects, so you don't necessarily need these 3 exactly. So the first one and most expensive is Copy Enchantment, as we talked about it earlier. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment that comes down and copies an enchantment. It's cloned for enchantments, and it's like $11.
Yeah.
And like this is a pretty rare ability, given it's not easy to copy enchantments. That's why Mirror Mate is so exciting as a card. But this is $11 and you don't need it. We're still cloning and copying lots of things. We're still, using Acquire to get artifacts and stuff. So copying enchantment isn't totally necessary. If you really, really want to, obviously you can leave it in, but Mirror Maid's in there. We can do some stuff with that. I think I'd just rather save the $11 and, not play this card.
Me too.
Next is Phyrexian Metamorph. At $10, this is the 3-1 Phyrexian blue mana. So you can actually just play this for 3 and pay 2 life. Comes into play as a copy of any creature or artifact. This one is one I would be a little leaning towards playing if I didn't mind the budget. But again, if you're looking to cut it, like we've got lots of effects that do this in the deck. It's not essential by any means. It just happens to be one of the more efficient, and because it can do a artifact or a creature, it's very good for that. It's definitely the best of these 3 budget cards that we're looking at.
Plus, it basically costs 1 less because of that Phyrexian blue. You're just going to pay 2 life instead of 4 mana.
Yeah, you can just play this as a Soul Ring on turn 3, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
What's that last one?
Sculpting Steel, 3 mana for an artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, copy any artifact on the battlefield. A lot of this is what's this up to? $8.
Yeah.
Very equipment-y decks usually want this to make other equipments. Yeah, copying any artifact for 3 is very good, and that's why it's this much. But as Andy said, if you want to just shave down a few of these abilities, right? Maybe add a little bit more card draw. You can knock off, what are we looking at here? $30 off of this deck.
Yeah.
Bring it down to 90. That seems pretty good.
That seems very good, and I do think it's worth it. Again, like I said, there's a lot of copy and clone effects available to you. These are all 3 fairly unique ones, which I think is why they cost this much, but there are other ones, and you don't really need it. If you're looking to get this deck under $100, you can easily cut these cards.
Love it.
Great. What about favorites? What about some off-the-wall favorites? I'll go first.
Okay.
It was fun discovering. It's kind of a discovery as well. But again, like I
both.
said, we're looking to copy not just creatures and artifacts and permanents and things like that, but we're looking to copy things on the stack. And Uyo, Silent Prophet, is a way to do that. 4 blue for the 4/4 legendary Moonfolk Wizard with flying. You can pay 2 and return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand. Copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is a big effect, and it's a big cost. Bringing back 2 lands is a lot. And she costs 6 to do this. So like this is not a terribly efficient card. It asks a lot of you, but just having this sit on the battlefield, like just knowing that like you can, for again, a pretty big cost, you can just copy any really cool instant or sorcery spell. It's a powerful effect, and people are either going to be afraid of it and not going to want to play into it. Like they're not playing Expropriate into this card. It's just not going to happen.
No.
But in that way, like you're kind of making it so that they're not even going to play those cards at all, which is also good. They're still going to play out their board. What?
Have you realized? I want you to finish your point, and there's something I want to point out in a second.
Okay. You just scared me the way you said that.
Well, this sounds really cool, and if you haven't seen this already, get ready to blow your mind.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, so they're probably not going to play they're not going to play good spells into that, and that's fine because sometimes you don't even want them to play into it. But Uyo was just a neat off the wall card. I thought it was an interesting inclusion.
I think that's so interesting that it reminded me of that new blue common Eldraine land. Pull up Mystic Sanctuary for a second.
Okay.
It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands, which we will. This is a land that Uyo is going to put back in our hand. When it enters the battlefield, you may put target instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your library. And then when we cast it, we can have Uyo copy it and bring this land back to our hand, play it again, put another spell on top.
And it's going to enter untapped because of all of our islands.
Yes.
That's interesting. So it becomes basically like, oh, yeah. So again, like that's copying instant sorcery spells you control, which in this deck, you don't control that many.
Well,
and
but
most of them just copy stuff.
That's true, but like double like twin cast, right?
It still is good though. You're right.
yeah, holding on to an extra one of those if it ever goes into my graveyard. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I'm in.
You can also copy something from this next card that we're going to talk about, which is your favorite.
This is my favorite card. I love this effect. I love Chaos, and this is Chaos Wand. 3 generic for an artifact. Pay 4 and tap it. Target opponent exiles cards until they hit an instant or sorcery, and you get to cast it without paying for its mana cost. The rest gets shuffled into the bottom. Whew. It's great.
Ooh, yeah.
It's fun to play the game of like, ooh, this needs to get countered. Do I take the chance of trying to get from a blue player's deck to see if I can hit a random counter spell? I'm telling you, that feels amazing when that works. But it feels equally bad when you're like, ooh, I want something cool. Board wipe. I don't want this.
Yeah. You gotta pay attention to who you're pointing the Chaos Wand at.
Oh, it's so fun.
It's quite chaotic, and
it's so fun.
Like sometimes hitting that board wipe against that white player, it's like, oof, okay, well we hit a board wipe. Or sometimes you hit that Storm Herd, and you're just like, okay, here's 40 Pegasus for 4 mana.
I love it. I love the card.
So this is cool. Again, another borrowing card here, where we're taking from the library. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? It's you're not putting anyone down on cards. You're not putting anyone down on permanents. You're just looking at their library. So
yeah,
if you do a good job of explaining that to your play group, they're really not going to be upset with you. I hope. That's my.
I hope so too.
I hope. Yeah. So there you have it.
Oh wow.
Just
Andy, this is a fun little deck you put together.
Yeah, these decks are fun. Obviously, this is like an archetype that exists. I'm not the first person, obviously, to come up with the idea of a clone deck. I do think it is a pretty ubiquitous type of deck, and I think a lot of us Commander players are excited by this idea when we first see it, when we first start playing the game. And I just realized, like, we've featured commanders that steal things in the past, but we've never featured like a full-on clone and copy deck.
True.
And there are tons of cards that do it. Almost all of them are in blue. And if not in blue, they have blue or just mono blue. They're like blue black, again, blue red, blue green. There's ones that do that. So very fun. And it's honestly surprisingly fun to like lock yourself into one color and still have this really effective style of deck. I really like that idea. So yeah. Very, very cool. Not super expensive. Again, if you can cut those few cards, you're going to be under $100 and you're going to be laughing.
Love it.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for watching this week. We will be back next week with another deck tech, another vlog and all that stuff. Check out Battle of Brews right here on YouTube. Very helpful. Go to TCGplayer, get this deck list from them, featuring the link below. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCGplayer affiliate link below.
That helps us out too. And for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.